Secretary.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Secretary.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Secretary.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands.
Are there any additions to the agenda? Public comment?
Gary Anino, 91 Main Street, 49 Wyassup Road, 172 Babcock Road. I've been trying to come during public comment for a couple months. When the planning and zoning, the POCD went in as submitted to the state because we were behind schedule. I had exceptions to what was in the POCD. And I was told at that time, and I was told recently in the town budget submission, that the POCD could be opened and revised at any time. And I'm respectfully requesting that we reopen the POCD to revisit a couple things that were injected into the POCD outside of the community conversations. There was community conversations set up when that was being drafted so the public could understand exactly what was being proposed by the town. And there were items added, I believe, by the town staff and the town senior leadership that the public did not have an opportunity to comment on until the draft was submitted. Specifically, the parking lot here and the proposed parking lot behind the town hall. Now, when it went in, I opposed it. When staff presented their budget for 2026, I asked what the process was to reopen it. They said all I had to do was come and request it, and it could be opened at any time. My concern is not about the parking lots generally. It's the fact that there was a process set up that was clear and transparent to the public, and the public was omitted from that decision to put those into the POCD. And they have an impactful, they would be impactful on the village, in my opinion. You're going to add another 20 slots here, which makes it a 40-car parking lot right here. And then the whole discussion about behind the town hall, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't know who else from the town knew about that or why it was added without the town having an opportunity to comment on that. So I think it's appropriate we allow the town to comment on whether that's something that we embrace or not. Thank you.
Commission review. Subject number 25-006, subdivision 830G, application of Dieter and Gardner, Inc., P.O. Box 335, Gales Ferry, Connecticut, 06335, for an affordable housing application per Connecticut General Statute 830G for a 10-lot subdivision, 9 new lots, 1 existing, on the land on property located at 446 North Wesley Road in an R80 APOA zone, tax map number 94, lot number 9390. Commission received on 3/13 and must act on or by 5/17/25.
Gardner, I'm sorry about that.
Pete Gardner, 1641 Route 12 in Gales Ferry. We prepared the plans for the current property owner. And as the notice said, it's a 830G subdivision. 830G is a affordable housing section of the statutes. And the property we have is on Route 2 opposite Maine's Crossing. And there's an existing home on it. We've done all the soils testing with the health department, prepared the plan that has gone through the review process. There were comments from the fire marshal, I believe, that he's asking for a little bit of information on signage. And we feel the plan is that I put before you is one of 4 sheets. That shows the boundaries of the property, the boundaries of the lots that are being proposed, and the existing home and proposed homes also are shaded. Great site, great soils. They'll be all accessed off Route 2 by a common driveway. And really, it's a pretty simple property to work with. And I'll be glad to try to answer any questions commission members may have.
Your access point here, are you gonna upgrade these roads? The gravel, are they gonna stay gravel through here?
The existing access drive.
Do you folks have more questions or do you want me to go ahead? Okay, so in my review of the 10 lot subdivision, and I say subdivision, not re-subdivision, because it's a different set of features in terms of process. So the subdivision meets the requirements because this is an 830G. So basically the requirements for local requirements go out the window. The only thing that really still pertains has to do with the legislative health district, which they did make a couple of comments, and also in terms of like fire safety. If this was a very large subdivision and you were talking about a large amount of traffic, then there might be other things that come into play in terms of traffic safety. So the fire marshal did comment and asked for the addresses to be visibly marked in terms of fire safety. We added those as conditions. And of course, they will meet the conditions of the legislative health district. An 830G subdivision in terms of affordability. This is a set aside for affordability. There will be restrictive covenants on the land records. There are maintenance agreements on the land records. And there are also the affordability plan, which was in your packet, that talks about how this is set up to be affordable and what sorts of not sorts of folks in terms of, but sorts of folks in terms of money. So there are, particular markers in terms of that makes it quote unquote affordable. And so that affordability plan will be listed as part of this subdivision. The town of North Stonington currently is at about 1% affordability. So until we get to the 10% level, 830G does apply to us. We certainly want folks to give us enough information for the subdivision to be appropriately built and appropriately listed on the land records, and to also protect it as an affordable subdivision. So all of those markers have been taken care of and have been included in your package. We gave them that in advance too, in case there were any questions. And we did get things back from Legislate and from the fire marshal in advance. This is not a public hearing. This is not re-subdivision. This is just subdivision. So it functions almost as if it were a site plan. You've met with the requirements and it's just about that simple. So, but if you do have other questions or things that you need to know or that you're not clear about, we can certainly ask and make sure that the plan does meet what your needs are in terms of making sure that we know what we're getting when the subdivision is constructed.
I have one question in that, through this breakdown, this little subdivision, are you planning any street lights in there? Or are they going in there finding their homes?
No lights.
No lights at all?
And power going in, meters all overhead, power going overhead. That's the power company. Down the street driveway. Another thing they have to do is look back at right road. Back door. Right. Yeah, no, I know, I've driven up. So you tap it, power coming in. As opposed to by the road. So you're switching over. Sounds like yes. Yeah, the only thing I ask is that at least you can identify the houses, because that helps us. So, yeah, far much like the same comment.
Motion. Yes, please.
Yeah.
Make a motion to approve subdivision number 25-006, application of Dieter and Gardner Incorporated, P O Box 335, Gales Ferry, Connecticut 06335 for an affordable housing application per Connecticut General Statute 830G for a 10-lot subdivision, 9 new lots, 1 existing on the land property located at 446 North Westerly Road in an R80 AP0 or APO zone, tax map 94 lot 9390. With the following conditions.
You can put it in, it'll be on the record.
The following application will be approved with the following conditions. Number one, the affordability plan for 446 North Westerly Road, 830G subdivision properties at 343 LLC, pages 1 through 28, as submitted on February 13th, 2025 by Heller, and McCoy shall govern this 10-lot subdivision. Number two, the declaration of joint driveway easement and maintenance agreement affordable housing subdivision of 343 LLC at 446 North Westerly Road, AKA Connecticut Route 2, North Stonington, Connecticut, lots 2, 3, 7, 8 by Heller, and McCoy, submitted February 13th, 2025, shall be recorded as part of the deeds for lots 2, 3, 7, and 8. Number three, the declaration of joint easement and maintenance agreement affordable housing subdivision of 343 LLC at 446 North Westerly Road, AKA Connecticut Route 2, North Stonington, Connecticut, lots 4, 5, 9, 10 by Heller, and McCoy, submitted February 13th, 2025, shall be recorded as part of the deeds for lots 4, 5, 9, and 10. Number four, the declaration of common driveway easement, affordable housing subdivision 343 LLC at 446 North Westerly Road, AKA Connecticut Route 2, North Stonington, Connecticut, lots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 by Heller, and McCoy, submitted February 13th, 2025, shall be recorded as part of the deeds for lots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Number five, pursuant to a letter dated February 8th, 2025 from Charles A. Steinhardt, the fifth Fire Chief, North Stonington Volunteer Fire Department. A, ensure addresses are clearly marked on the road, Route 2. B, ensure each home has an address marked on it visible from the common driveway. If not visible from the driveway, have a sign at the end of the driveway indicating the addresses. C, ensure driveway clearance is a minimum of 12 feet by 12 feet and maintained.
Favor?
Aye.
Record shows all. Thank you very much. Everybody enjoy. Take that stage.
Planning issues and discussion.
So under public comment, Mr. Nino had asked you to reopen the POCD. And when we did our budget presentation, that question came up about how do we go about doing that? And to reopen the POCD, you would make the call just like you would to make a POCD in the first place. You'd have to hold a public hearing. You'd have to advertise in the newspaper, and you'd have to reopen the POCD. So you are allowed to do that at any time during the 10 years. We've obviously submitted, when I started with North Stonington, you were right in the middle of the public hearing process. And we were already 3 months behind from having to turn it in to the state. So we went ahead and closed it and voted and did tell a couple folks in the audience that if we did need to come back later, we could do that. So that's what's been asked for tonight. It doesn't mean that those are the only things that could be looked at. You could look at anything in the POCD. So I don't know if the commission would like to do that immediately. I don't know if you would like to go back and look at, the POCD and discuss which parts of it you'd like to talk about, or if you had other things in your own notes from then. Because I came sort of late to that process, part of the process happened without me. So there are certain things that I just can't even comment on because I wasn't here for them. But we can certainly do that if you folks would like to do that. And it would just be the same process as you would before. So there is a little bit of cost involved because we would have to make, announcements in the newspaper. We would have to hold a formal public hearing. So I'm just throwing that back to you.
I have a question now. Or no?
When you open it back up, the entire thing opens back up. So anyone could talk about anything, whether just for example, say, I know since I've been here, folks have talked to me about, some folks thought that, we should have pressed harder for having sidewalks on Route 2 or having the connection from the school over to this building, be ADA compliant, things like that. So there are things that folks have said that have been there in the past or that they thought should be more detailed. You could go and open up any of those things or add to any of those things. But it does have to be done in an open forum because you do have to give folks the opportunity to comment either negatively or positively on any of the items within the POCD.
So also on this public hearing, it would run for a couple of meetings for people to come in.
You could definitely do that. You could leave it open for several meetings so that people would be able to come and review it again and see, were there things that they didn't get a chance to comment on last time, or maybe they didn't realize that this was the moment to do that. Like I said, I wasn't there at the beginning of that, so I don't know all of the, all of your sort of gathering of people and gathering of opinions. And I know that they did go out and have, public meetings at different places with different groups of folks, but I wasn't here for those, so I don't actually know how all that went.
If we do open it back up and we make changes
Mhm.
and we refile, that restarts our 10-year clock.
It does, actually.
It does. So like, even though we're spending money, we'll extend it. So if this takes 3 or 4 months, we're going to go from not 9 years from now, we have to refile again. We will extend it from 10 from that date.
That's true. That also brings up the fact that, when you do reopen it, there are certain factors that you do, that the state requires us to have within the POCD. So there are certain, it's like, your math homework. You have the 4 or 5, things that are mandatory that the math teacher assigns. And there might be, a few extra credit things that they'd like to have, but there are certain things that have to be there in terms of information. So we couldn't take out things that were mandatory, but we could add other things. Or if you felt like, once it was published, oh, you thought about it later and wait a minute, that didn't really come out quite the way you intended it to be, you can make those adjustments along the way. Some towns do like a hard reset every 10 years, and at 5 years, they have kind of a check-in because things do change. 10 years is a long time. And also, sometimes some of the other things happen along the way. when the MS4 stormwater standards went into play. That changed a lot for folks in terms of the POCD. Sometimes when the septic standards change, it can change a lot of other things within the POCD in terms of your long-term planning. So, and that's up to you because this is your document.
Oh, I didn't see. So how do we capture it? Last time was very extensive. It was meeting after meeting. I came in at the very end, but Gary has his 1 point. I think everybody here has a couple things that we wanted to look at. We did talk about this before. How do we capture it and bound it? Can we open it, call a meeting for the public? Everybody brings their stuff out, we shake it up, Yahtzee, or how do we do that?
You do have to let folks know that you're going to open it. And you do have to let them know, what you're planning to actually, talk about, and each of you, like you said, might have things that have come up since then or came up along the way and you felt like didn't get squared away at that time. Or maybe you thought about it after it was published and you realized, oh, wait a minute, we actually didn't quite get that the way we wanted it to be. So we can open it up, we can set the call, we can open up the POCD, we can publish that we're going to have a public hearing. But you do need to sort of let people know that it's coming. And what you might want to do is open the public hearing and then, make sure that folks have enough time, especially if you're going to redraft a section or redraft, whether it's a paragraph, a sentence, a page. I don't know how extensive you want it to be. So how extensive you want it to be might actually dictate how long you leave it open.
So
And because it's yours, that's helpful because there's a little bit more leeway in terms of the timing.
So when we advertise it, we can advertise some dates so people can see, okay, this is a 6-month period, not
No,
a six.
you don't know.
Well, you can't go that far. You can't go that far, but you could also tell people that, you're going to keep this open. They should come to the meeting. And if they had, input that they didn't feel like was listened to before, was heard, or that might be new, or it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be an argument. It can be, oh, this didn't come up last time, or since then in the budget, or we got a grant for this, or we didn't get a grant for that, or the state's POCD now is saying these things, and we wish we had included those. So it could be for a number of reasons.
Do we know what the budget is for this, to open it? I'm not to open it, but the budget left for the POCD to reopen it?
I guess we'd have to look at that.
I do.
Yeah, that would be
I
my
don't think
question during
I don't
budget
think I know
season.
that.
Are we gonna be going and seeking an appropriation? Because
Well,
we're
first-
over budget that we would, for our department, that
Do
we would have to.
reprint the whole plan, or is this just addendum?
Yeah,
to
could we
what's
just
gonna
put
be?
pieces in like we
Because
do with our zoning regs?
It
So
was $5,000.
he's got some,
to
yeah, so if
reprint
he's
it.
got some things that he wants to take out or the public doesn't. Now, before we get there, if we have these public hearings
Mhm.
and citizen A comes out with something that we just don't agree with,
Mhm.
we don't necessarily, because we're voting on that as our commission, it may not change because our vote, we just don't agree as planning and zoning.
It may not. And so your charge as the Planning and Zoning Commission is to set out the long-term plan. And it's supposed to be both conservation and development for the town. So this is the long-term 10-year plan for the town of what you think is appropriate. Now, in terms of cost, you're absolutely right. So Cheryl said, and I'm not sure if all of you heard it, it cost us about $5,000 to have them all printed. They're already printed. So if we made big changes to the plan, we might have to reprint $5,000 worth of plans. And so you have to decide, is that important to you to use money in that way? There are also, there should be a little bit of money that would have to be set aside in terms of ads. The public hearing ads all legal ads with the New London Day are
We
expensive.
don't do the new.
Oh,
London
sorry,
Day.
the Wesley Center. I forget about that.
That's really not. a
So,
big
but
amount.
a legal ad can be expensive. It is,
Do we
does come out of your
currently,
budget.
does anybody know if we currently have that in the budget or
The
would we?
legal ad is really the least of it.
Okay.
It's the printing of the document.
The documents, so we could vote to make supplemental changes. I mean supplemental, like I could take this, like we do with our regs and say, we're gonna take out page 12 and put in a new page 12 in here. Like we could,
They're
I love the
They're
way
already
they're
bound.
printed
Can't
and
take
bound,
them
but
apart and-
we couldn't take them apart. I agree, but
Yeah.
if we had to maybe modify them to save money, we could 3-hole punch them like we have here. I love the way these are, don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the cost, like if we only had to take minimal changes come out and we don't want to reprint and spend the 5,000 to reprint them all.
And
What's
without,
your opinion with that? Should we?
without
look at that way or
opening
which-
a public hearing, we don't know how much is going to change as part of what's sort of the,
That's the date.
that is the what if.
Mhm.
It could be something small, it could be a lot, and you don't know. And because I wasn't there at the beginning, I don't have a good handle on that to tell you.
I would have to
You were
sit there and read it before I could, it would take a meeting or two before we go there. I
Mhm.
mean, if we were just meeting and held it to, the parking lot thing where we wanted to take it out of the POCD and then, back it. But not change the whole thing, in other words.
It doesn't.
What Ed is saying, is there a way to redact a section? Like right now, the main concern that we've heard is
Mhm.
the parking lots and the pictures that get on there. So us at the end, when we got in, they were put in and it wasn't passed around. Is there a way just to take them out of the POCD? Just that section, I mean, because
But
they're
you could
pictures,
still do
correct?
it If the town decided to come and say, I want to modify the site plan to put in parking, they could still bring that to
Right.
you, even if it's not in the plan.
That is true. I
Right,
mean,
so-
if someone could come
Right.
and say, they were coming for a site plan and they can say, okay, it's in the POCD, this is consistent. But if it's not in the POCD and it still meets the regulations, it can still be approved. So in terms of that, I think in some ways, it's always better when you have things that are consistent with your long-term plan, especially in terms of money. And when you're talking about your budgets right now and you're talking about your goals of the town long-term, it's helpful to know, what the expectations are, not just for this year and for now, but for the long term of what you're trying to accomplish. And those goals and objectives sometimes fall into other things. If you know that something's consistent with your long-term plan and you have, money for this and money for that, you might be more successful with having something that's within your plan. But it also doesn't stop you from, okay, if you have a site plan that meets the site plan requirements, that doesn't mean it has to be in the POCD.
Just because it's in the POCD doesn't necessarily mean that we have to do it.
Right, that was,
No,
that was, I was about to say, I wasn't part of it. That was my understanding when
Yeah.
I came in at the end. These are just ideas and general thoughts on
Guideline.
guidelines in the future, not direction we are going to pursue
Mhm.
each and every one of these. They're
Yeah.
just kind of all encompassing thoughts and ideas around
But
what,
if you,
I agree, but how many times have we had people come in and quote our POCD to us and go, it is in the POCD, so this is why you should do it, whether
yeah.
we
that's
concur
what
with them or not,
right?
they're
Mhm.
taking this as, and I know it's a guideline, but it seems like we had a few things where they said, well, this is in your POCD.
Mhm.
It meets what you're looking for. You should be following this. And why are you not?
Right. So is
And
it,
that's fair.
is it a playbook or is it?
If I may, Gary,
Yeah, yeah.
So look, I'm not looking to spend a lot of town money to do this. What bothers me about this is a couple things. It went in the POCD. No one had an opportunity to comment. The draft of the parking lot site plan, just a draft around that greenhouse out there. I saw it the other night at the Board of Selectmen meeting. I think it's dated 2023. So this has been kicking around for a while and nobody got the comment on it. And now we're submitting for a grant, a steep grant to do this parking lot. So it seems like the snowball's rolling before the town really got to understand what we're talking about doing. And that just inherently seems wrong. The public should have had an opportunity to comment about what you're going to do here or what we're going to do here. And now completely different, but the parking lot behind the town hall got injected to. It's not getting any visibility. It's not getting any traction. I'm told it's not in the current grant application. But without asking the public if they want to do this and say, voila, we got a grant. We only have to spend 20% of the money, only 80% of the money. It'll go right through the system without anybody saying, wait a minute, we're going to pave around a greenhouse in a town like this. Does this make any sense? So sorry. I just thought you should understand where I'm coming from on this.
Look when you guys get home and see if there's anything else in the POCD, and then we'll either decide, are we gonna go forward to change it, or as the board sits now, we could talk with the town and see exactly what they're doing, and is this the best spot, for a parking lot, and what's it gonna impact,
And is there a way to get a feeler out from the rest of the public? We know Gary's opinion on that matter, but is there, without costing too much money or posting on the website with saying, hey, we're thinking about making changes to the POCD. Are there any concerns? So we get feelers to know that it's out there, or is that dangerous? Or I'm just not sure. I mean, I want to make sure we're doing the right thing, but we do have a concerned citizen with the POCD at this point.
Right, I do understand that. I also know and then have handicap. Because the other thing is too, you're gonna want to have the handicap people as close to that door as possible, not not down there, not over there.
Do we have any more information about this grant and what's being applied? Has that gone through us at all?
It's been applied for.
It has been, it's already gone
It's the
out.
new steep grant and it's been applied for and submitted. I do know that from the
But
meetings
didn't
and talking
go
with.
through us.
It didn't, no,
at
the grants
all.
won't go through us. Now,
Right. It's
correct me if
just-
I'm wrong, if they try to do this parking lot, it still has to come through us for approval.
Yes.
So we
So,
would have a public hearing on that.
no,
and
you
say-
wouldn't have a public hearing. This would be
It
a
would
site
just be
plan.
Site plan.
It
for
would be a
park-
site plan. They would have to meet the requirements of zoning regulations. But it would not be a public hearing. And so I don't want that to get, because there's a difference between a public meeting and a public hearing. And that would be a site plan.
So
So
we would
We wouldn't,
see the site plan and review its adherence to the zoning
to the zoning
regulations
regulations.
and review what the POC, the tie-in of
would-
the POCD is the fact that a version of that picture might be in there, and if it matches that, then it's more challenging if it meets everything, if there are objections?
Let me go a little bit, let me dive into that a little bit. So the steep grant itself, when the steep grant asks the town if something is, if you're asking for something is consistent with the long-term plans of the town, because they don't want to fund something that's completely, the opposite of what you're laying out as your long-term plan. So that's one issue. We don't actually comment on the steep grants. We're not part of that process. What we would be part of the process, though, is if they got that money, or if they decided to budget other money and they decided they wanted the parking lot, then they'd come back and they'd have to modify the site plan that already exists for this facility. And they'd have to make sure that the parking was adequate, the drainage was adequate, the ADA accessibility was adequate. So they'd go through all of your site plan objectives that are within your zoning regulations for this zone. And there might also, depending on how large of a parking lot or small of a parking lot, if you're taking away other impervious surface or adding to that impervious surface, you can have changes to the stormwater, changes to the drainage, but also, and just like if we were adding like a Walmart here, and you were adding a very large parking field that was, say, in excess of 200 more parked cars, then you might even have to go back to the state in terms of your state traffic safety, in terms of, does the road out, facing, your exit, does that road, does Route 2 have the carrying capacity? Now, in this case, it probably would anyway, but that is, something that they would look at if it was a very large parking field. So they would take that site plan that already exists for this facility, and you'd have to make sure that as it was modified, that it still met all of the town's requirements in the zoning regulations. And that would be what you would do here. You would check that here to make sure that you'd met all of the town's requirements.
But with the stream over there and stuff, it'd have to go through wetlands, because if you're changing the way the runoff is and everything else with that stream over there. But I mean, it's not a guarantee,
Nothing would be a guarantee, no, because they'd have to come and show you that it met all the requirements for the town. Mhm.
How many times a year do we actually use this place to vote? 3, 4? And we don't need to get into that. This is philosophical discussion. There's 17 to 25 cars parked here every day. And I think it's great. The learning center is great, but whether we want to admit it or not, we now have the giving closet and the giving pantry. And I don't know how this board feels, but that's retail. We've taken an educational facility and now we have retail, and we have a traffic and parking problem. This is a much bigger thing than is being actually communicated. It's not just we want parking for when we vote, because voting is pretty small and pretty manageable. I think we could do it if we limited it only to ADA or restricted access or whatever. But if we're putting in a loop parking lot because we want to get more people in and out for our tenants, and I consider the retail part of the tenants, it just seems very pre-thought and contrived. And I want to assume good intent on all of this, but I'm not sure that's the case.
No, no,
So can we table this, do research as the boards, like we said, so we can reach the members that aren't here and say, do you have concerns? And then talk about opening this possibly the next meeting, so we can go back and review our notes, because
What do you mean opening it?
no, we can discuss it.
we could discuss, no, not open it. I'm saying we can talk about this at the next meeting if it's a thought. Because I'd have to review all the notes that we went through, because I jumped in at the end, so I do have notes. I know we have a couple members that aren't here that might have things, and then
Yeah.
talk about this again next meeting and
You can
discuss
talk
it.
about Whenever you want.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
That's under discussions with
Yeah.
us,
Yeah.
know.
You can bring up the discussion again and decide whether or not you think it's important at this time, or and maybe it's that, oh, we would like to bring this back up, but there's something else happening and we want to wait another year because we know other things are coming up that are going to add to it, or we think this is important to do right now because it's time sensitive for something else. And different people might have different opinions on the board.
Right,
Don't
and then-
forget the lakes too, like
Yeah.
that's
Right,
right
yeah, we
now,
started that.
like,
We got that seasonal lake thing coming, and we got our next meeting on the 25th, so that's rolling. So if we were to, just a scenario, if we're to open now for a little bit, and then in 4 to 6 months and we got another one, then we're turned around, and open it here for a change, and then we finalize, we print for 5, and then we got another thing coming that changes the POCD again, which, so maybe, so that was my thought, is we got
I think we can
things
talk-
in the fire right now that we've got to.
Right, and I think we can discuss it amongst ourselves.
Yeah, they would have to come back to you with a fully fleshed out site plan modification. And it would have to account for what's on the property now, the uses that are on the property now, what's changed or what's proposed to be changed. Are they peeling up other pieces of the parking fields? Are they just adding this parking field? Is this impervious surface? Is it pervious surface? Those both have different drainage, So a lot of it may be on how exactly they're going to do it. I mean, they certainly showed sort of a concept in the POCD, but that doesn't necessarily mean that when you sit down and, with the towns, we consult for an engineer to do this. We would have to, because we don't have someone on staff to do that. But when they did that, they would have to give you a site plan modification, just like anybody else's site plan modification. It still has to meet the same requirements, because we would have to be able to look at, it'd have to have an A2 survey, which I believe we already have on file for this facility, so they could go back to that. But they'd have to tell us their drainage plan, the parking plan, the uses on the site, what they were taking, what they were subtracting, what they were adding, exactly where it's located, any easements, any right-of-ways, where any other utilities might already be. I know there's some utilities that go straight across the street over here, but there could be other things as well that would have to be part of that plan, and you'd be able to review that at the time.
But to Gary's point, if it meets all these regulations and they prove all of that, there's nothing we can do. We'd have to vote saying it meets the regulations. The only thing we can do is change something in POCD. I think that's why Gary brought this up here.
Well, there's two sides to that. So if it meets your regulations, then you have to approve it because it meets your regulations, unless you change something in your zoning regulations and it didn't meet that. Whether or not it's consistent with the POCD, in some ways that actually has more to do with the money.
saying the
sure when
the
they-
State would be less likely to give the grant if we.
If
were
it
taking
was
out.
not
Yeah,
consistent,
that's-
like if
that's
you
my
had
point.
something in your POCD that said that you absolutely don't want any more parking on this site, and the town was asking for a grant for parking, that wouldn't be consistent with the POCD. And then when you filled out the application, which the grant writer who filled out the application, probably showed that piece that said that this was consistent with the POCD.
But if they came, if it wasn't, if it had never been in the POCD and say a grant was requested for this, even though it didn't say it and was considered and approved, and it came and it met all the regulations, just because it's in the POCD or not, we would have to review it on the merits in accordance with the regulations.
Correct.
The only other thing, like we were talking about, Cheryl brought up the seasonal lakes. We will be having a meeting on the 25th. It'll be of March. It'll be at 6:30, but we're going to be on the top floor of the library. There is an actual meeting in here at that time that they're hoping to record. People are just going to have to make their choice. What it is invasive plant meeting. Well, they're just gonna have to make their choice which one they go through, and if the people hosting this meeting can record, that's great. They can go back and listen to it, but the public's gonna have to pick which one that they have to go through. And that's talking with people who've called reached out that were at the meeting we were all at and said they want the meeting to continue. So that will be at the 25th at the Wheeler Library at 6:30. Senior planner and zoning officials report and issues.
Just to let you know that in terms of the seasonal lake stuff that you've been talking about in the background, we are getting, questions in, public questions, people coming in, asking about it, realizing that it's out there. And we keep directing them back to the subcommittee because we want, all of that conversation to stay within the subcommittee. And with the idea being that once the subcommittee, kind of gets a handle on really what wants to be brought forward, that subcommittee will come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission and they'll make, some sort of draft of a starting place of, are we going to make a change to the seasonal lakes overlay? Are we not going to make a change? If we are going to make a change, how might we make that change? And so those discussions seem to be actually gaining a lot of traction and a lot of information. People seem interested in actually digging in and talking about that. So we are hearing that in the office and we just keep, sort of directing back so that all that conversation stays in the same place so that when it comes here, into the public view and we bring forward some kind of draft, or it could also be that you decide from the subcommittee that, oh, wait, we don't actually want to change anything. That could be decided too, that when you come back to this body, then we'll decide then how to move forward.
New applications, I don't see any. Old business. New business. Review of minutes of regular meeting 12/12/24. You have them in your packet. Entertain a motion to adjourn.